Hey everybody, sorry for the lo-fi, both in terms of the camera and in terms of my face, but we are. There's been a whole lot of stuff going on, and I've been coming across a whole bunch of different ideas, both in my own head and interactions with other people, and it seems like it's useful to share these more broadly. So think of this as deep code bits. In this particular topic, I want to focus on the notion of universal basic income and how it relates to the problem of effective collective intelligence. I think there's a couple of I think bad frames and bad ideas about how UBI is being considered. And to be perfectly frank, I think these are also part of some bad ideas about the nature of how the market works. So when we take a look at the market, at least a sizable fraction of what we are looking at and caring about is distributed intelligence. Right? It's a form of collective intelligence. The whole premise of the market, the reason why it's considered to be more powerful and more valuable than a bureaucratic top-down sense-making and choice-making mechanism, is that it has the advantage of being able to access the perspective and evaluative capacity and values of everyone, right? Everybody at the edge, and then through the very specific communications protocol of money and the price signal, can propagate that signal in an environment that actually the invisible hand turns into intelligence. Other people can use it, right? So um, the price of a gallon of gas tells me a lot about what's going on in a huge distributed marketplace. And I don't have to know any of the rest of that information. I don't have to know anything about the underlying drilling technologies and transportation technologies and geopolitical forces and all that other stuff. I can actually look at the price of gas, and that gives me the information which is at least relevant to some of my choices, certainly not all of them. And specifically, can give me information that may be relevant to my entrepreneurial choices. Right? So if I say the price of gas is quite high, I might decide to focus my efforts on electric cars. Okay, so in that context, right, thinking about the market as a form of distributed intelligence, I'd like to introduce UBI as a mechanism to increase the intelligence of the market. And in fact, that's the point, I think, that there's a frame of UBI as a form of welfare that I think is wrong. I think that happens. It happens as kind of a side benefit, a really nice side benefit. But more importantly, what UBI is a mechanism of dramatically increasing the value of the commons of the market as a collective intelligence. And it does that in two ways, at least two important ways. And then, by the way, I'll throw in a third piece of the story as a bonus at the end. So one piece of it has to do with the network topology and the supply of signal. Right. So, for example, my own sensorium, my six senses, provide input to my intelligence. Right. I'm using my senses to make sense of the world around me. Now, if I close my eyes, the fact that I have eyes isn't very helpful because I've cut off the amount of signal that I'm getting from the visual field, and I'm a lot less intelligent than I otherwise would be. Okay. Well, in our current distribution of money, we have a very bad ratio of signal. We have some nodes, say like Bill Gates, who have an enormous amount of signal, meaning enormous amount of money that he is putting into the supply and demand equation of the entire market. A massive, massive amount of signal. Now, I will accept the premise that he's a very smart guy. I accept the premise that he's learned big skills and has good things to share. But the magnitude of asymmetry of that signal to all the rest of the nodes in the environment is clearly disproportionate, and therefore it concentrates too much of our collective attention on the things that his particular intelligence is orienting attention towards, where his money is flowing. All right, flip it around. Contrary-wise, we have, on the global basis, 8 billion people who have scarcely any signal. And in the United States, we still have a sizable fraction of the population who have far too little signal. Right? So their capacity to perceive what's going on, know what things matter, and orient our collective attention in those directions is far too little. All right? So at a topological level, if you're just trying to create a distributed intelligence graph and you're using money as a mechanism of trying to get communications from all the different nodes of what deserves attention and what deserves to flow resource and energy at it, which is, again, what this market is doing, you would want to have at least a minimum amount of signal coming from all nodes. Right? So instead of UBI, why don't we call it UB signal, right? A universal basic signal that every node, which say every member of the network must have, for the network to actually be getting the information it needs to be doing effective sense making, right? That's one piece. That's key element. So when you start thinking about it in that way, and you're like, wow, well, how powerful would the marketplace be? What would be the value of the commons of the market if we were actually able to get it to have meaningfully, substantially better intelligence because we actually just had the right amount of signal? Well, go with the metaphor. How much powerful would I be if I opened my eyes? It's a lot. It's a big difference. And so that's one big argument in why UBI is in fact not just a important, but I would say as we go forward and as the complexity of the environment we're dealing with is continuing to grow, getting our markets to be vastly more effective at collective intelligence means UBI is almost certainly requisite. Okay, the other side. And this other side is where welfare and market effectiveness also get bound up. And this has to do with the fact that every person, every node on the network is going to have a differential relationship around their risk, the risk profile. Right? So they may be risk neutral, they may be risk seeking, and they may be risk averse. Now, this becomes particularly pointed where risk aversion and risk seeking behavior are highly asymmetric, which is to say when people have a lot of money, people have very little money. Because, of course, in our environment, there's a smooth curve and then a steep drop off in terms of how many resources you have. Right? If you've got $20,000 a year, predictably, reliably, and smoothly, and from an end up, you have we might call optionality. You are relatively risk neutral. You can at least provisionally-ish say no to an option. So if somebody comes to you and makes you a market transaction, says, hey, would you do X for Y dollars? Your ability to say no is not catastrophic for you, right? You don't get stuck having to sort of starve to death if you say no to that. But as soon as you start getting below that number, and it may in fact be a higher number, so just use X, but below that number, you actually become risk averse, which means that your ability to say no to a transaction isn't giving the right signal back into the market, right? Were you risk neutral, you would have said no, but you're not risk neutral. So now you're saying yes. What that's telling us more than anything else is just the market actually is characterized by nonlinear relationships around risk aversion and risk seeking behavior. And that actually doesn't tell us a whole lot more. It just means that our network topology is fucked up. That's all it tells us. Because, well, let me give you the example. So I've got a particular archetype of an individual that I read about after the 2008 financial crisis. So she was an old woman who cleaned the toilets in the JP Morgan office. And she actually ran 3 shifts. So she went to 3 different places throughout the day. So she's a very hardworking person. And of course, she's paid minimum wage because that's what you pay to the people who clean the toilets in your office. So you had bankers who were definitely destroying the economy and being very greedy and bad, making lots and lots of money. And this lady who was definitely not destroying anybody and was doing something of vital service who was paying very little and working really, really hard. So I would say that's a problem in the nature of the market because here's the thing. Imagine if she had the ability to have optionality. Imagine if she had a source of income that was not dependent on that particular job. And when offered to be paid $8 or $10 an hour to clean toilets, she could just say, fuck off, and go do whatever the hell she wanted, including nothing, right? It's crucial. The ability to do nothing changes the profile of what happens across transactions. You now have an actual agreement, an actual win-win agreement. Only works if both parties can actually walk away from that transaction. If both parties can walk away, then the price that they agree to is the real market price. If one party can't walk away, the price they agree to is not the real market price anymore, and you're not getting good signal in your price equation. So let's imagine she could say fuck off. If she had a UBI, for example, and that UBI was big enough that she could literally just say, no thank you, I'll just go home and do nothing but raise my kids and grow a garden and whatever else I think is cool. Well, very soon thereafter, the boys at JP Morgan would have to figure out how they're going to clean their own toilets. Of course, they could clean their own toilets. That's a perfectly valid solution. I certainly, that's how I clean my toilet at home. Or they could choose to hire somebody. But now they're going to have to actually hire somebody at what we call an actual market transaction wage. No, okay, so what's it going to cost? What's the right actual price for that particular service? Well, if both parties on the transaction have the ability to say no and to walk away, then the market price is whatever they're actually able to agree to. Both people now with the free choice to enter into the relationship agree. I'm going to assume it's going to be a lot more than $8 an hour. Maybe it's $80,000 a year. Ask yourself, how much would you have to be paid to clean somebody else's toilets? Particularly fuckwads at JP Morgan. Let's go with $100,000 a year just to make the number right. Now, here's the thing. JP Morgan can afford to pay $100,000 a year to get their toilets cleaned. I mean, their annual bonus check might go down by a little amount. They'll still be very well heeled, and the toilets will still get cleaned. But now the market is actually correctly seeing what is really valuable in the marketplace at a much higher level. The real value of our actual services, what we actually want, our actual demands, is more effectively revealed. And so our collective intelligence is more able to orient resources, which is to say, for example, if the sort of total amount of GDP that was going to toilet cleaning went from 0.1% to 3% because the price actually went up, or in this case, 1%, then maybe Elon Musk would turn his attention from building electric cars to building toilet cleaning robots, right? Just entrepreneurs would start getting right signal from the marketplace of what places to point their attention, because those are the places where they can make the most money, right? So this is the thing. UBI is a mechanism for actually making our market work effectively as a collective intelligence device. It creates a mechanism where we're getting enough signal from all the nodes to actually benefit from the distributed intelligence that's available in the entire market. And it creates the ability that the price equation is actually getting real information because the transactions that are being made are actually reflecting the real values in the environment. Right? Those are two key elements. Once you've got those two key elements in place, you get a vastly more powerful market as a commons. So then the last piece, the bonus. This notion of a human sensor network, right? The idea of the marketplace as being a way of using human beings everywhere as super, super high quality sensors of what's going on in the world and what kinds of choices would actually have the most value. If we say that's the thing we're trying to accomplish, or at least one big piece of the thing we're trying to accomplish, then the market is one piece of that. It's not the whole piece. Right? There's lots of different ways that human beings can be empowered to provide signal back into and then back out. You can actually have a highly decentralized mechanism where, like the market, like my economic choices come from me, they go to everyone subtly, and come from everyone back to me subtly in a way that I can make sense of them. So if we set that as a higher order objective and say, all right, our choice, our challenge is to figure out how do we actually design a distributed collective intelligence that has the characteristic that everyone's full perception across all the modalities of perception are communicated in communications channels that propagate smoothly and easily to everyone else in a way that is maximally supporting their own choice making and then back. That's the design we're trying to get in place. And UBI is a significant piece of that, in my estimation.